It says, verse 10, and the chief of the eunuchs said to Daniel, I fear my sovereign, the king, who has appointed your food and drink. For why should he see your faces looking worse than the young men who are your age? Then you wouldn't endanger my head before the king. So the chief Ashpenaz said to Daniel that he was afraid that if they didn't eat what the king was saying and giving them, that he would grow weak, and then it would be his problem or his head. So he says, I fear my sovereign, the king, who has appointed your food and drink. For why should he see your faces looking worse than the young men who are your age? Then you would endanger my head before the king. My head is interesting that, well, there are many things that I want to say regarding this Ashpenaz, and what I already said regarding the name, how it can be seen as fire or prophecy through the mouth. And the noon, I already explained it regarding the last, but regarding Hillel, for instance, the noon is connected to the word Nafal or Nephilim, the fallen ones, as in the fallen angels. Also, there is one of the books that were taken out of scriptures pretty much that says that Yahushua said that the head of prophecy was cut off when they cut the head of Yahuhanan the Baptist, the immerser, or John the Baptist. So John the Baptist represented an angel that had power over prophecy on this earth. But when they cut his head, the head of that angel was being cut, well, the authority, which is what head means or represents. That's why here Ashpenaz, as a malach, is saying that if they don't do what the king said and they don't eat the food that the king is giving them, then they would cut his head. They would take his authority, as in the angels. Obviously, in that time, it meant literally the head of this person, but it represents the authority of an angel who's taken out. And why? Because there are some people who, set apart from the rest, decide not to eat what the world is eating. They decide not to learn the teaching of the false religions, not to adopt it, not to put it in practice, not to teach it as the world is doing. So they decide not to eat nor drink what the world of confusion is eating and drinking. And because of that, the angel will be taken out. And that is the fear of the person here. And that is my point, because the chosen few will be without blemish through the blood of Mashiach. And then after knowing Mashiach, they will go, as we see in Revelation 7 and 14, that they go behind the Lamb. Wherever he goes, there they go. So the chosen few only eat what the good shepherd gives them. And that is like the food that Joseph gave his brethren when they came to Egypt.